A senior Delta Force operator who served alongside the British SAS in Baghdad in 2005 was asked, years later, to describe what he had witnessed. He had run operations in 3 countries. He had served under the most advanced Special Operations Command in human history. He chose his words carefully, the way men do when they are trying to describe something that still doesn't quite fit inside the categories they were trained to use. "Those guys walked in like ghosts," he said, "and came back with everything we'd been looking for." He was not being poetic. He was giving the most accurate description he could of a tactical reality that had taken him completely by surprise. For British soldiers, minimal equipment, no drone overhead, no armored vehicles on the outer cordon, no signals intelligence sweet humming in a vehicle down the street. Just 4 men, a map, and a level of individual skill that the most technologically advanced military force on Earth had not encountered before and was not immediately sure how to process. This is the story of how Britain's 22nd Special Air Service Regiment operated in Iraq between 2003 and 2009. It is a story about what happens when a small team of exceptionally trained soldiers enters the same battlefield as a vastly larger, vastly better equipped force and quietly, methodically, without fanfare or announcement, outperforms it. It is not a story about British superiority or American failure. Both forces were elite. Both were committed. Both were fighting the same enemy in the same city at the same time. But they were not fighting the same way. And the difference between their methods produced results that nobody in the Pentagon had predicted and that nobody who witnessed them has ever fully forgotten. To understand what the SAS brought to Iraq, it is necessary to understand what Iraq demanded. By 2005, the insurgency was not a conventional enemy. It had no fixed positions, no supply lines that could be cut, no command structure that could be decapitated with a single strike. It was a living, adaptive network of cells, each operating with partial independence, each capable of reconstituting after losses, each embedded inside a civilian population of millions. Al-Qaeda in Iraq, under Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, was conducting a campaign of systematic mass casualty terrorism. Vehicle-borne IEDs were detonating across Baghdad at roughly 80 per week. In Ramadi, the capital of Anbar province, the situation was worse. The city had become a grinding urban battle that consumed entire battalions. The Second Battle of Ramadi involved approximately 5,000 American soldiers supported by armor, artillery, and close air support. Inside that battle, JSOC had transformed the targeting cycle into something resembling an industrial process. Identify, fix, finish, exploit, analyze, repeat. At peak operations, JSOC was conducting up to 12 raids per night. The kill-capture rate was devastating. And yet the network kept regenerating. The senior leadership kept moving. The bomb makers kept working. The intelligence was good. The operators were elite. The problem was something more fundamental. The problem was visibility. Every American special operations element that moved through an Iraqi city announced itself. The armored vehicles were loud. The helicopter overwatch was loud. The Predator drone circling at altitude was invisible to the naked eye, but created an electronic signature that insurgents equipped with commercial radio scanners had learned to detect. The convoys of up-armored Humvees sent a signal to every spotter on every rooftop within a kilometer. Teenagers with mobile phones. Shopkeepers who knew to close their shutters. Dogs that reacted to diesel engines. The entire urban environment had been calibrated, by years of experience, to detect the American approach long before the first boot hit the target building's floor. The compromise rate for vehicle-borne operations in Ramadi during this period was estimated by SOC's own analysis cells at between 35 and 45%. That meant roughly 4 out of every 10 operations were blown before they reached the target. The enemy knew they were coming, and a target that knows you are coming is a target that is gone. The SAS proposed something that the American liaison officer present at the briefing received with open skepticism. They would walk in. For men on foot, personal weapons and radios only. No vehicles, no outer cordon, no drone overhead. They would infiltrate through whatever terrain the environment offered, drainage channels, alleyways, the gaps between buildings that appeared on no map and that no vehicle could navigate. They would move through the district at the speed of silence, identify the target, confirm presence, and call in the assault force only when they were certain. If they were not certain, They would not call. They would extract and try again. The American liaison officer asked what their plan was if they were compromised inside the district, 600 meters from the nearest friendly force, for men against 30 or more armed insurgents. The SAS captain's answer was 2 words: "We'll handle it." The operation that followed has never been given an official name in any published account. Participants referred to it by the code name assigned to the target district. It took place in late 2006 in Ramadi, and it has been discussed in professional military education classrooms from Fort Liberty to Sandhurst in the years since. Delta Force had attempted an operation in the same district 11 days earlier. 24 operators, for Stryker vehicles for the outer cordon, a Predator drone overhead, a quick reaction force of 16 Rangers staged 3 minutes away. The operation lasted 47 minutes and ended in a 90-minute firefight that wounded 2 Americans, killed 6 insurgents who were not the intended target, and failed to locate either the weapons caches or the high-value target the operation had been designed to capture. The target was an AQI facilitator responsible for coordinating vehicle-borne IED attacks across eastern Ramadi. Intelligence indicated he operated from a network of 3 safe houses in a residential district south of Route, Michigan. The district was honeycombed with early warning networks. Previous operations had been detected before reaching the target every single time. The SAS patrol departed at 0130 hours. For men, the patrol commander carried an L119A1 carbine, 6 magazines, 2 grenades, a personal roll radio, a medical kit, water, and a map in a waterproof case. No infrared laser designator. No helmet-mounted thermal fusion. A single-tube night vision monocular clipped to a basic mount. Total equipment weight, including body armor, approximately 22 kilograms. His 3 teammates carried similar loads, with one additionally carrying a general-purpose machine gun broken down between 2 patrol members for heavier firepower if the situation demanded it. They entered the district through a drainage channel running along the southern perimeter, concrete-lined, approximately 1.5 meters deep, carrying a trickle of sewage water that smelled of chemicals and rot. They moved through it for 230 meters in a low crouch, stepping carefully to avoid any sound that would travel through the concrete. The night temperature was around 11 degrees. No moon, 70% cloud cover. What happened over the next 4 hours was an exercise in a form of warfare that technology cannot replicate and money cannot purchase. The patrol moved at approximately 50 meters per minute in open ground, less than 20 in confined spaces. They stopped 17 times. At each stop they crouched in available shadow and listened. Not looked. Listened. In urban environments at night, the human ear detects threats faster than the eye, even with night vision. Footsteps on gravel. A door opening. The metallic sound of a weapon being checked. A phone vibrating. At one stop, the patrol held position for nearly 4 minutes because the commander heard what he believed was breathing on the other side of a courtyard wall 3 meters away. It turned out to be a goat. But for those 4 minutes, 4 men stood motionless in the street, fingers on triggers, controlling their own breathing to near silence, waiting. That is not a technique that can be uploaded to a system or mounted on a rail. It is the product of years of training that had specifically selected for the psychological capacity to remain completely still in conditions of extreme threat for as long as the situation required. The first safe house was reached at approximately 0235. 2 men sleeping on the roof, one with an AK pattern rifle. Neither matched the target's physical description. The patrol observed for 18 minutes, photographed both individuals through the telephoto lens, and moved on. The second safe house required the patrol to enter the target building's courtyard through a gap in a collapsed wall. An extraordinary risk. 2 men entered while 2 held in the alley. Inside, through a ground floor window with no glass and only a fabric curtain, they photographed the interior. 2 men on mattresses. Between them, against the wall, 6 partially assembled IEDs. One of the sleeping men had a scar across the left side of his jaw. The target was present. The patrol commander transmitted a single brevity code at 0311 hours. One word. It triggered the launch of the assault force, a combined SAS and American element of 18 operators in 4 vehicles, staged at a combat outpost 14 minutes away. What followed was the most dangerous phase of the operation. For men, in an alley less than 2 meters wide, within meters of a high-value target surrounded by armed fighters, waiting for 14 minutes in conditions where a single sound would have ended the operation and almost certainly ended them. They communicated by touch signals, a squeeze on the shoulder, a tap on the arm. Nobody spoke. The rear man watched the black throat of the alley they had come through. The patrol commander kept his eyes on the building entrance. At approximately 0320 hours, a door opened somewhere nearby. Footsteps on concrete, a man's voice, then the sound of urination against a wall less than 10 meters away, around a corner they could not see past. The footsteps came closer, then stopped. 45 seconds of silence. Then the footsteps retreated. A door closed. No one in the patrol moved a millimeter. The assault force arrived at 0325. The patrol commander transmitted coordinates accurate to within 8 meters of the building's actual position. He had fixed them using a known reference point on his map, the road bridge over the drainage channel, whose grid reference he had memorized, and dead reckoning from that point through every turn the patrol had made, counting paces and accounting for direction changes in the dark. No GPS, no electronic beacon, a map he had studied for 48 hours before departure, and the ability to translate that study into precise movement through three-dimensional urban space in near-total darkness. The assault lasted less than 3 minutes. The target was captured alive in the ground floor room exactly where the patrol had photographed him 2 hours earlier. 2 additional fighters were detained. 6 partially assembled IEDs were seized. 3 mobile phones recovered from the target, and the detained fighters would later yield intelligence leading to 11 subsequent operations. No shots were fired during the assault. No coalition casualties. No civilian casualties. No collateral damage. The district barely stirred. Residents interviewed the following day reported hearing some noise around 0330 and assumed it was an Iraqi police patrol. The Delta Force after-action report from that morning contained a sentence that has since been quoted in multiple accounts. The version most commonly cited reads, "Those guys walked in like ghosts and came back with everything we'd been looking for, and they did it with gear my guys would have thrown in the trash." It was not an insult. It was not delivered with resentment. The relationship between the SAS and Delta Force in Iraq was one of deep mutual respect, professional admiration, and genuine brotherhood forged through shared operations against a lethal enemy. The 2 units exchanged personnel, shared intelligence, conducted joint raids, and bled together. But respect does not prevent honesty, and the honest assessment from within the American Special Operations community was clear. The British had demonstrated something that the most expensive targeting machine in history had not been able to replicate, that in the most dangerous environment on Earth, for men with basic equipment and extraordinary skill could achieve what 24 men with the best technology ever fielded could not. The SAS compromise rate in Ramadi, according to sources who served with Task Force Black, was below 8%. The American rate in the same city was between 35 and 45%. The difference was not marginal. It was an order of magnitude, and it explained almost entirely why the SAS jackpot rate, the percentage of operations where the intended target was actually present when the assault force arrived, was so much higher. The SAS jackpot rate hovered around 72% during the period between September 2005 and March 2006. SOC's rate during the same period was approximately 48%. If the target does not know you are coming, the target is still there when you arrive. That was the entire equation. But Ramadi was only one theater. Across Baghdad, the same methodology was producing the same results at scale. Task Force Black, operating from a compound that American visitors consistently described as almost comically austere, was conducting between 5 and 7 raids per night with a force that never exceeded 60 operators in country. The intelligence cycle that powered these operations was built on a principle the SAS had first developed not in Iraq or Afghanistan, but in the terraced streets of Belfast. Every raid produced materials. Every set of materials produced targets. Every target, once hit, produced more materials. The cycle fed itself. A mobile phone seized at midnight would be analyzed by 0200. A new target package would be ready by 0400. A team would be briefed and moving before dawn. The insurgents had built their operational security to withstand conventional intelligence timelines, days or weeks between identification and action. Task Force Black was operating in minutes. The network had no framework for that. The Baghdad campaign over 90 days targeted the AQI network responsible for the majority of spectacular attacks in the city. The car bombs hitting markets, mosques, and government buildings that were killing dozens of civilians per week. The network comprised an estimated 80 to 220 active operatives. Task Force Black began at the periphery and worked inward, each ring of the network dismantled in sequence, each captured facilitator providing the next link in the chain. The outer ring fell in the first 2 weeks, the middle tier through weeks 3 to 6, the core through weeks 7 to 12. By the end of the 90-day period, coalition intelligence concluded that between 87 and 212 operatives had been removed from the battlefield. The spectacular attack rate in central Baghdad dropped by over 60%. An American brigade commander whose forces operated in the affected area described the effect with a precision that cut through every official formulation. "We couldn't do what they did," he said. "We'd go in with a company-strength element, 200 soldiers, helicopters, the whole 9 yards, and we'd come out with nothing. These guys went in with 12 men in 3 cars and came out with the guy we'd been hunting for 6 months. It was like watching a different war." The question that American commanders kept returning to was not whether the results were real. The results were in the after-action reports. The question was why. Why could 60 men achieve what 6,000 could not? The SAS selection process produces a specific type of human being. Not the fastest or the strongest, though the physical standards are among the most demanding in the world. The type the selection identifies is the man who continues when everything inside him has recommended stopping. The man who can navigate alone in terrible conditions to a precise point on the Earth's surface using nothing but a map and a compass. The man who can remain motionless in a hostile environment for hours without the anxiety of that stillness breaking his concentration or his nerve. The Brecon Beacon selection, the continuation training at Hereford, the close quarter battle repetitions in the Killing House, they do not produce a soldier who is dependent on his equipment. They produce a soldier for whom equipment is optional. The GPS is useful when it works. When it doesn't, he navigates from memory. The radio is useful when the signal holds. When it doesn't, he communicates by touch. The armor is useful when the threat demands it. When silence and invisibility are more valuable than protection, he leaves it behind. That philosophy was visible in every aspect of how the SAS operated in Iraq. The civilian vehicles, the plainclothes, the minimal kit, the sandals that had become, in certain accounts, almost legendary, operators conducting pre-assault reconnaissance in local footwear, sitting in tea houses within 200 meters of target buildings, watching and counting and mapping, indistinguishable from the population around them. One American Delta operator who prepared for a raid alongside an SAS team described watching 4 of them walk out of the compound toward the target. "They looked like they were going to a barbecue," he said. "Shorts, sandals, t-shirts, pistols in their waistbands." He thought they were going to get killed. They came back 3 hours later with 4 detainees and a hard drive full of intelligence. The technological question this story raises is not whether technology is useful in warfare. It is self-evidently useful. The Predator drones, the satellite intelligence, the encrypted communications, the precision weapons, they saved lives and enabled operations that would otherwise have been impossible. The question is whether technological capability can become a substitute for rather than a supplement to the fundamental human skills of soldiering. The British experience in Iraq answers that question in specific, quantifiable terms. Sources recruited, targets hit, networks dismantled, lives saved. In Ramadi, for men with a compass achieved what 24 with satellites could not. In Baghdad, 60 operators with civilian vehicles and paper maps produced a 60% reduction in mass casualty attacks that thousands of soldiers with billions of dollars of technology had failed to achieve. The insurgents in Ramadi had adapted to counter every piece of technology the most powerful military in history could deploy. They had adapted to drones. They had adapted to armored vehicles. They had adapted to night raids with overwhelming force. They had developed early warning networks so sophisticated that the approach of an American operation was common knowledge in the target district before the first vehicle stopped. They had not adapted to 4 men walking silently through a drainage ditch in the dark. Because you cannot build an early warning system against something you do not know is there. By 2007, the evidence had become impossible to argue with. SOC's own analysis acknowledged the British approach. Changes began appearing in American special operations methodology. Footborne approach operations increased. Studies were commissioned examining what planners called low-signature insertion techniques and their correlation with operational success rates. The SAS practices in Iraq were cited explicitly as a model. Delta operators underwent additional land navigation training without GPS. The absolute faith in technology as the decisive variable was not abandoned. It was tempered by the recognition that in specific environments against specific enemies, the decisive variable was the individual operator's skill. A senior American special operations officer who had initially been skeptical of the British approach later acknowledged it to a British counterpart in terms that carried no diplomatic reservation. "We measured you by our standards," he said. "We should have measured you by yours." The legacy of what Task Force Black demonstrated in Iraq extends beyond the specific operations and the specific numbers. It cuts to a question that every military force must eventually confront. What do you invest in? Equipment or people? Systems or skills? Technology or training? The British answer, forced upon them by budget constraints that made the American approach impossible, turned out to be the answer that money could not buy. They invested in the operator. They built men who carried less and knew more, who needed nothing but darkness and patience to become effectively invisible inside a city of 7 million people. They built men who had been selected and trained and hardened to a point where the most sophisticated urban insurgent network in Iraq could not detect their approach, could not anticipate their methods, and could not survive their patience. The Delta Force operator who described them as ghosts was not being metaphorical. In Ramadi, in Baghdad, in the drainage ditches and the tea houses and the dark alleyways of a city at war with itself, the SAS moved like something the enemy's systems had no category for. Not because they were superhuman, because they had spent years becoming precisely the kind of human that no sensor can find and no early warning network can detect. For men, a map, a compass, 17 seconds to clear a room, 8% compromise rate, 72% jackpot rate, one target captured alive, exactly where they had left him, in a room they had photographed 2 hours earlier from 2 meters away in silence. Those guys walked in like ghosts, the Delta operator said. He was right. And the ghosts came back with everything.